Tonight on Primetime, the United States and Iran have signed a memorandum of understanding aimed at ending hostilities. But without Israel's direct involvement, can this deal deliver lasting security? The document is signed, but tough questions remain. Good evening. The United States and Iran have signed a memorandum of understanding at the G7 summit in Versailles, setting out a framework to end hostilities and begin talks on a permanent agreement. Well, the deal confirmed by both sides includes an immediate ceasefire across all fronts, the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, and the lifting of US sanctions.
US President Donald Trump signed the Iran Memorandum of Understanding at the Palace of Versailles on Thursday at the G7 summit, just prior to a dinner hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron. Before Trump's statement, Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Esmail Baghaei had announced that a memorandum of understanding with the United States has been finalized and signed electronically by both sides.
The Iran-US Memorandum of Understanding is now officially complete and finalized, since it has been signed by both sides. The Farsi document is similar to the English one and was signed by the other party.
The memorandum includes an immediate end to the war on all fronts, including Lebanon, the full resumption of maritime traffic in the Strait of Hormuz, the lifting of a US blockade of Iranian ports, the waiving of US sanctions on Iran, the unfreezing of its assets, and a plan worth $300 billion for the economic rehabilitation of the Islamic Republic. Once implementation of the MOU begins, the US and Iran will start negotiations for a final deal. The document also states that the final agreement will be endorsed by a binding UN Security Council resolution. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said on X that the leaders of the US and Iran had signed the Memorandum of Understanding and, as a first step, Islamic Republic of Iran will instantly reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and the United States of America will immediately lift the naval blockade. The meeting between American and Iranian delegations, headed by Vice President Vance and Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, is still expected to take place as planned Friday in Switzerland.
Well, more details are emerging about the deal agreed by the US and Iran to end these 3 months of conflict. One of Iran's state broadcasters has released the outline of the 14-point deal, which was signed remotely by Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian on Wednesday.
Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian added his electronic signature to the Memorandum of Understanding with the United States on Wednesday. Included in the 14-point document are the details of a 60-day ceasefire, which buys time for both sides to negotiate a final peace deal. It also includes a clause about Lebanon, which was a sticking point for Tehran during the negotiations. According to the text published by the IRNA state news agency, the document begins with a declaration on the immediate and permanent termination of military operations on all fronts, including in Lebanon. With a 60-day time period, the document also includes a point stating that it could be extended upon mutual consent. On Washington's part, it states that the US will begin the removal of its naval blockade and complete it fully within 30 days. In return, Iran will ensure the safe passage of commercial vessels without charging tolls for 60 days, only from the Persian Gulf to the Sea of Oman and vice versa. The document also states, according to Tehran, that the US and regional countries will develop a plan for the reconstruction and economic project for Iran to the tune of $300 billion. Washington will also end all sanctions against Iran, including UN Security Council resolutions, IAEA resolutions, and all unilateral US sanctions. According to the memorandum, Iran reaffirms that it will not procure or develop nuclear weapons. Both sides have agreed to resolve the issue of stockpiled enriched material according to a mechanism that will be mutually agreed upon. This will be supervised by the IAEA. In terms of energy sources, Washington has agreed to issue waivers for the export of Iranian crude oil, petroleum products, and derivatives, and all associated services. Additionally, the U.S. will release frozen or restricted funds and assets of Iran once the points of the deal are implemented. The last clause in the statement says that the final deal will be endorsed by a binding UN Security Council resolution, something Tehran has insisted on to ensure the U.S. holds up its end of the agreement. The chief negotiator for Iran, Mohammad Baqir Ghalibaf, who is also the Speaker of the Parliament, emphasized this point in an interview on the state TV network IRIB, saying the memorandum is based on the principle of reciprocity. Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baqai also said Iran and Washington are working through Pakistani mediators on the date and venue for the beginning of the peace talks, so that they can start as soon as possible. Turaj Shiralilu from Tehran for A News.
Well, joining us now from Tel Aviv, Israel, is Middle East analyst Uri Goldberg. Welcome, Uri, to Primetime. Good to have you with us. Okay, so we've had the signatures on the MOU documents then. Months of conflict. Why do you think this has happened now?
Well, I think the reasons are quite logistical, factual, technical, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Oil was about to stop flowing because of the inability to keep the Straits of Hormuz open. President Trump was quite aware that the immense pressure he was facing from his own electorate, but also from the entire world, was about to get that much more intense. And he analyzed the situation along with his people and realized that there was simply no reason to continue fighting.
Yeah, it's very interesting the amount of complexity in terms of the sort of multitude of different pressures going on behind the scenes. The deal provides sanctions relief, doesn't it, and access to frozen assets for Iran. What's your perspective on that element? Do you see it as a necessary concession or an area for concern?
Well, here's the thing about this deal. Nearly every clause in it, every decision made by it in recourse to it, these are all political. These are not numbers based. This isn't about hard data or a finite amount of resources that will run out if they're not addressed in a specific formulation. These are political decisions. So sanctions relief, if you ask the right person, may be seen as a source for concern. It's certainly the case on the Israeli side. Israel is very much afraid that Iran, that has more money and more resources, will use them to continue its war against Israel. Ask Trump, ask the international community, ask the Iranians whether sanctions relief is a matter for concern. And they'll say, no, it's a matter of doing the right thing. The United States effectively stole billions and billions of Iranian money when it froze them under a unilateral sanctions regime. Any negotiations, any attempt to create some sort of joint resolution or compromise has to be carried out in good faith. Part of doing so in good faith is returning the stolen money.
And the Strait of Hormuz obviously is reopening, and I know you quite rightly make the point that these are political decisions made by politicians. Nevertheless, though, the markets do seem to have responded positively. Do you think the economic benefits here might in a way be the strongest guarantee that both sides stick to the agreement?
I think they're a very powerful guarantee. I don't think they're all that distinct from the politics, not in Trump's case, but not in the Iranian case either. But I also think that both the Iranians and Trump are identifying a chance to create the beginnings of a new order in the Middle East. And as an Israeli, I can say that the major part of this new order is the exclusion of Israel as the region reassesses its potentials and possibilities and sets about rebuilding after 3 years of a very destructive war on several fronts. So this agreement very much is also about what's not said in it and about who's not included in it, and that is Israel.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's just talk about that a bit more, if we can. I mean, as you say, Israel's not formally a party to this MOU. Prime Minister Netanyahu has stressed that Israel retains freedom of action. But we've also heard from President Trump's, haven't we, about these comments about Lebanon. You know, he said, oh, you don't need to take out a whole building every time someone from Hezbollah walks in. I mean, he is well known for sort of controversial comments. But, I mean, what situation does that leave the US-Israeli relationship in?
Quite a dire one, but also unprecedented. Just before we began speaking, I understand that Vice President Vance made a statement in which he said, we've begun 60 days of negotiations. Every time we seem to be reaching some sort of advancement, some sort of potentially beneficial solution for both parties, Israel steps in and wrecks it by behaving with a murderous abandon, or whatever it was, the formula that he used. I think Trump has grown tired of Israel's behavior. I think he finds Netanyahu's attempts to draw him into systemic Israeli fantasies. For example, we will assassinate the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic, which will drive Iranians out into the streets and make the new Iran a subsidiary of both the United States and Israel. I think he now realizes that was an Israeli fantasy, and I think he finds Israel's insistence on acting alone and disproportionately, first and foremost, disrespectful personally to him. I think President Trump, because of his particular temperament, because of his division of the world into winners and losers, because of his desire for a deal above anything else, understands Israel's behavior in a way that is really profoundly different from just about every American president that preceded him. And this is going to take the American-Israeli relationships to places where it has never been.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, he did see people driven out onto the streets, but many of them, though, were driven out to the streets in support of the Iranian government, which obviously wasn't the effect that Mr. Netanyahu was hoping for. I mean, let's just look to the future then. How hopeful are you about this deal? Are we going to end up in a situation of another 60 days, another 60 days, just this sort of inevitably sort of protracted peace process where we're sort of stuck between peace and war for an indefinite period?
This is going to take some profound political resolve from both the Americans and the Iranians. And that resolve is to resist what will be very clear, very overt Israeli attempts to disrupt this deal. I am cautiously optimistic because I think this deal emerges not from some abstract commitment to lofty principles, but from very base human, almost tactile reasons, driven by economic factors, driven by Trump's sense of disrespect towards him, driven by the Islamic Republic's sense that it is not taken seriously. These are none of these are idealistic reasons, and I, for one, tend to believe in solutions that emerge from such motivations, much more so than from a stated commitment to abstract ideals.
Very interesting. Mr. Goldberg, thank you very much for speaking to us. We appreciate your analysis. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, after the break, Ukraine carries out one of its biggest drone attacks on Moscow, striking an oil refinery and targets across the Russian capital region. As both sides escalate their aerial campaigns, is this war entering a new phase? Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Ukraine has carried out one of its largest drone attacks on Moscow. Russian officials say an oil refinery and several residential and industrial sites were damaged. The strikes came after a major wave of Russian missile and drone attacks on Ukraine as both sides step up aerial assaults in the ongoing war.
Ukraine launched a major drone offensives on Moscow in an attack that damaged a key oil refinery sparking fires and sending debris falling across parts of the capital region. Moscow's mayor Sergei Sobyanin and Russia's state news agency said it was one of the largest Ukrainian drone attacks on the Russian capital in recent years. Sobyanin said air defences shot down at least 194 drones targeting the capital overnight into Thursday. In the wider Moscow region, a high-rise residential building, an industrial facility and several private homes were also damaged, according to authorities. The strikes followed a major wave of Russian ballistic missiles and drone attacks on Kyiv, marking a further escalation of the air war between the two sides. Authorities in the northeastern Ukrainian city of Sumy said one person was killed in a drone strike, while air raid alerts were issued across much of the country.
Well, as we saw there, the strikes came after a major wave of Russian missile and drone attacks on Ukraine, highlighting the growing importance of long-range aerial warfare in the conflict. Joining us now is Andriy Dobryansky, policy expert at the Center for US-Ukrainian Relations in New York. Andriy, thank you very much for joining us. Good to have you with us tonight. Ukraine says this was a response to the Russian attacks then. What message do you think Kyiv was trying to send here by targeting Moscow so directly?
Bringing the war home to the citizens of Russia, especially the major metropolitan areas of Moscow and St. Petersburg. These populations haven't really been affected by the war in as much as it has been the ethnic minorities in Siberia, as well as foreign nationals who have been brought in to fight this war, often under false pretenses. But the people of Moscow and St. Petersburg have not been talking about this war as much as they have been in the last month, now that the war has come home to them. They see their lives disrupted. It's not just the fact that they can't buy Western goods in the store. Now they have to deal with the fact that they have oil refineries on fire. They can't go to the airport because they're closed down when they have drones surrounding them. And now they get to witness and understand what Ukraine has been dealing with for the last 4 years.
Are we seeing then a new phase, do you think? A shift from traditional sort of battlefield warfare to a contest of these very strategic strikes deep behind enemy lines?
Well, the war has shifted dramatically from the very first days. We know that Russia lost within the first 2.5 years 20,000 pieces of mechanized vehicles, so tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and this is now morphed from having artillery on the front line to this gray zone of several hundred kilometers on either side, where both sides use drones, mostly drones. It's 80% of casualties are caused by drones on the front line. And now, as we go further afield into striking deeper into Russia, it's a response from Ukraine to what Russia ramped up last year. At this point last summer, this may feel like the Middle Ages for us, but at this point last summer, the history is that Russia was ramping up their own Shahed drone production to go up to several hundred a day attacking Ukraine. And that's what 2025 was. Daily attacks of 300, 400, 500 drones attacking Ukraine. And so this isn't as many as Russia launches against Ukraine, but what it's demonstrating is that Russia does not have the aerial capacity to shoot down these drones that it thought it had and that it promised its citizens it had.
And also specifically the targeting of energy infrastructure. We've seen a lot said and written about this. To what extent is that increasing, do you think?
That's been specifically the plan worked out between the Western allies and Ukraine. So long as the Western allies keep on their Western sanctions, blocking Russia from purchasing replacement materials, replacement parts for their oil refining facilities, Ukraine will keep targeting those facilities. And then Russia cannot, it's not just the fact that they go offline, but they can't quickly be repaired because those facilities rely on parts that can only be purchased from the West. And that's really a two-pronged strategy, not so much to completely level Russia, but to force Russia through the pressure of their main export, which is fossil fuel exports, pressure them by cutting those off finally to get to the table. Because it's been Zelensky who's always willing to go to the table. President Putin has not come to the table a single time.
And Andrei, who do you think is adapting faster in this war right now, Moscow or Kyiv?
Well, it goes in waves. I think last year, when again at this point last year, we saw the development of the Shahed and the rapid increase in their production that allowed them to terrorize Ukrainians on a regular basis. And also last summer, I was speaking with several diplomats at the United Nations, and they were puzzled why why at that point it was over 3 years of the war, and nobody had figured out a decent counter to these low-cost Shahed drones that Russia was using against Ukraine. And over the course of the year, we have seen that innovation. We now have interceptor drone technology from Ukraine, not just on an individual, but being developed at scale to the extent that Ukraine can manufacture enough of them to export them to other countries, including Middle East allies that really need those to fight off the Iranian attacks. So this has been the development over the course of the year. Last year, we thought Russia had the upper hand by their increased production of the Shahed drones and no good counter by the West. And now Ukraine has the upper hand because they can neutralize them with their interceptors as well as develop their longer range drones.
Yeah, a huge amount of interest from the business community, the investor community in the military drone technology that's being developed in Ukraine. I mean, many people saying that they've become a world leader in that area. I mean, how well is Russia doing at defending its territory against this very sophisticated network of drone attacks that Kyiv's able to deploy?
Yeah. Let's concentrate on that key word, defending. Defending against drone attack is the big problem for the entire world. This is a brand new piece of technology in terms of military warfare. We were used to seeing large, very expensive drones being used as far back as the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War. But what Ukraine and Russia have developed are lower cost with off-the-shelf parts. And that means you can mass manufacture them, and they can overwhelm whatever defenses you have. Normally, air defenses are very expensive as well. We saw that in the Middle East when countries like the UAE or Bahrain, Qatar were using Patriot batteries to defend against these $1,000 drones that are being attacked against them. So the real issue here is twofold. One, you need some kind of interceptor, which Ukraine has led the way with interceptor drone technology. The second is the detection, and that's really where Ukraine has excelled. From the early years of this war, I'd really say by the end of 2022, we were seeing solid on-the-ground detection of drones, mostly done through sonar and audio detection of how they're coming in, but that has been amplified then with LiDAR and radar technology. This kind of technology is something that the rest of the world needs to develop ASAP for our large buildings, commerce centers, cultural centers as well. We need to be able to detect that a drone is coming because our current, as far as Western standards, our current defense detection systems are not set up for these small drones to come in. And even a small FPV drone can carry enough explosives to damage very large buildings.
And with the world watching, Andrei, do you get the sense that symbolism still matters here, almost as much as territory?
Oh, 100%. I think that's the attack that everybody's talking today is really the demonstration that Ukraine is turning the tide. Just a few months ago, we had the 4th anniversary of the war, and we had a major series of 3 major polling firms asking United States citizens about the war, and it came out that 2 out of every 3 Americans wanted increased support of Ukraine during this war, and this is 4 years into the war. But the one thing that they weren't understanding, normal citizens, was that Ukraine had changed the game on the battlefield, and that by the time that poll came out, Ukraine had actually been gaining territory and Russia had been losing territory this year. And that has continued throughout the course of this year. With every week that goes by, it's Russia losing territory in Ukraine, Ukraine gaining. And that's something that has not seeped into international consciousness. So when you have moments like that explosion in Moscow, that cinematic or more symbolic explosion on the screen is something that slowly changes the minds of people, not just world leaders, but their populations also, so they understand when they're having a conversation about what's happening during this war, that Ukraine has actually turned the tide over the course of several months.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It sort of coincides with the sense emerging from the G7 that there was a sort of a shift almost in President Trump's thinking in that regard as well. I mean, how hopeful are you of any sort of diplomatic off-ramp here, in the next 6 months?
Well, again, it's putting pressure on Russia, which is something that, with the change of administration in the United States, there was kind of a pause on the pressure ramping up. We are now seeing that as of 2026, a really serious ramping up of pressure on the other side. Because again, when President Trump came to office, he met with President Zelensky, had an unfortunate dialogue in the White House, but following that meeting, anytime that President Trump has said, I would like to meet with Zelensky, President Zelensky has been on a plane and gotten there. President Zelensky also flew to Turkey in May of 2025 when President Trump said, I think it would be a good idea for Putin and Zelensky to meet. Neither Putin, neither Lavrov, no, not even high-level delegation came from Russia. It was a lower-level delegation by the end. So it's been Ukraine always demonstrating that they are ready to hop on a plane and talk to President Trump or the Russian side, but it's the need to put pressure on the Russians. And that's only being done by those long-range attacks on their oil refining facilities, targeting their economy to finally push Putin to sit across the table from Zelensky.
Mr. Dobryansky, great to speak to you tonight. Thank you very much for joining us on Primetime.
Thank you so much.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the top business stories shaping the day with Andy Mioch. Don't go away. A warm welcome back wherever you're watching Primetime. Now, Andy Mioch has joined us. He's got the very latest business news. Andy, what is on your agenda tonight?
Well, Guy, oil prices continue dropping following all the latest developments regarding the Middle East conflict. The Bank of England and the U.S. Federal Reserve kept their interest rates steady, and there's some tech news as well. First up, international benchmark Brent crude dropped to its lowest level since early March following the signing of the U.S.-Iran memorandum. Shipping activity in the Strait of Hormuz has shown signs of recovery, with oil tankers leaving the Gulf region.
Brent crude oil dropped below $78 per barrel on Thursday, the lowest level since early March, as markets reacted to the US and Iran reaching an agreement to end a prolonged conflict that caused the largest supply disruption on record. Early signs of progress emerged as several vessels began crossing the Strait of Hormuz again after weeks of disruption. US President Donald Trump said an interim agreement had been signed, with plans to quickly reopen the key Persian Gulf shipping route. A return to normal flows through Hormuz could allow major producers, including Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iraq, to restart millions of barrels of halted output. Oil has already fallen around 38% since reaching a 4-month high in April. Shipping activity has shown signs of recovery, with Saudi oil tankers and vessels carrying LNG and fuel leaving the Gulf region.
The Bank of England opted to keep its benchmark interest rate steady at 3.75%. The hold was backed by 7 of the 9 Monetary Policy Committee members. It comes after the European Central Bank and the Bank of Japan raised rates in the past week.
The Bank of England kept interest rates on hold at 3.75% in June, as it has since the start of the US-Iran war, judging it would be premature to raise rates now given the unclear strength of increased inflation pressures. The Central Bank's Monetary Policy Committee voted 7-2 to keep rates on hold, in line with economists' expectations in a Reuters poll, after external member Megan Green joined Chief Economist Hugh Pill in calling for a quarter-point rate rise. But most other MPC members appeared little closer to raising rates, broadly sticking with what Governor Andrew Bailey has called an active hold, which he views as an effective tightening compared with market expectations of cuts before the conflict. The Bank of England's approach contrasts with those of the European Central Bank and Bank of Japan, which have both raised rates in the past week.
Across the Atlantic, the U.S. Federal Reserve also kept its interest rate steady. However, projections from the Fed showed policymakers expected rates to rise later this year.
The Federal Reserve held the benchmark interest rate steady on Wednesday, and policymakers expect a hike in borrowing costs later this year amid growing concerns about inflation lodged above the US Central Bank's 2% target. New quarterly projections showed 9 Fed officials now anticipate a rate hike by the end of 2026. And an updated policy statement removed language that had been used to flag the likelihood of further reductions in borrowing costs in 2026. The statement, in an early sign of new Fed Chairman Kevin Warsh's influence, removed any guidance about future rate moves altogether, with a revised format that simply stated the rate decision and reaffirmed the central bank's intent to keep ample reserves in the banking system. The shortened document was approved by a unanimous 12-0 vote.
South Korean chip maker SK Hynix says it's delivered samples of its next-generation high-bandwidth memory chips to major clients. HBM chips are used in AI chipsets and are crucial components for processors such as those made by NVIDIA.
SK Hynix said on Thursday it has shipped samples of its latest high-bandwidth memory chips to major customers as the South Korean chipmaker seeks to strengthen its position in the fast-growing AI semiconductor market. The next-generation 12-layer HBM chip reaches speeds of up to 16 gigabits per second per pin and offers over 20% better power efficiency than previous models, the company said. HBM chips are used in AI chipsets and are crucial components for processors such as those made by NVIDIA, helping handle vast data needed to train AI models. SK Hynix is NVIDIA's main high-bandwidth memory supplier.
Still with chips, Intel's stock surged after US President Donald Trump said on social media that the semiconductor company had agreed to a deal with Apple to design and build chips in the United States.
Intel's shares rose 8.8% in pre-market trading on Thursday after US President Donald Trump said Apple had agreed to work with the company to design and manufacture its chips in the United States. Intel's stock has seen significant gains recently after struggling for years, having relinquished its dominant market position. The stock has surged 464% in the past 12 months, with the company hitting a market cap of $608.7 billion. Last year, the Trump administration took a 10% stake in Intel and announced plans to invest roughly $10 billion in the chipmaker to build or expand US factories. Trump previously said he should have asked for more of a stake in Intel, 8 months after the government's Intel position grew to be worth more than $50 billion.
And finally, Apple CEO Tim Cook said the company plans to raise prices on its products to offset increasing memory and storage chip costs. Cook said Apple has done its best to avoid passing on the rising costs to consumers, but he told the Wall Street Journal that price hikes were now unavoidable.
Apple plans to raise prices for its products as a shortage of memory chips bites. That's according to Chief Executive Tim Cook in an interview with the Wall Street Journal published Wednesday. A surge in AI-driven demand has left consumer electronics companies battling to secure supplies of key components, with chip prices soaring as a result. Cook says Apple has done its best to avoid passing on the rising costs to consumers, but he told the Journal that price hikes were now unavoidable. He didn't say exactly when the increases would come or how big they would be. Cook identified memory chips as a key issue, saying suppliers were passing on huge price increases. He said Apple was ready to invest in steps to boost supply, but wouldn't build its own memory chip factories. Cook is due to hand over the reins to John Ternus in September. The change in leadership will come as Apple launches key products. It's widely expected to debut its first folding handset that month, alongside new versions of the regular iPhone.
And that'll be all in the business brief for tonight. Handing it back to you, Guy.
Great stuff, Andy. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, Azerbaijan is using the Islamic Development Bank Summit in Baku to showcase its economic ambitions, from green energy and connectivity to reconstruction and regional integration. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Now, at the Islamic Development Bank annual meeting in Baku, Azerbaijan unveiled ambitious plans for economic growth, green energy and regional connectivity, while highlighting its strong financial position and reconstruction efforts in Karabakh. Our correspondent Leila Rahimli has more from the venue.
We are reporting from the 2026 ISDB Group annual meeting here in Baku. There is a strong sense of purpose in the air today as global finance leaders gather to map out new regional strategies. The summit is already in full swing, and the big headline this morning was the opening address by Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev. Taking the podium, the president set a highly confident tone. He emphasized that despite global shifts since Baku last hosted this event in 2010, Azerbaijan's stability remains unshaken. To back that up, he shared some striking financial metrics, highlighting that the country's foreign currency reserves now exceed its external debt by an impressive 20 times, with the national debt sitting at just 6% of GDP.
And by this figure, I think Azerbaijan is one of the leading countries with a very stable financial situation, balanced budget, and what also is appreciated by the leading rating agencies like Moody's and Fitch, which upgraded recently our ratings up to the investment grade, and with the prognosis forecast positive and stable. So we don't foresee any complications with respect to our economic development.
He also pointed to rapidly expanding energy map, noting that Azerbaijan now exports natural gas to 16 countries while aggressively pushing into green energy, with plans to deliver 8 gigawatts of solar and wind power to Europe by 2032. What tied all of these ambitious projects together was the theme of peace. President Aliyev noted that Azerbaijan and Armenia have now lived in peace for a full year, creating a stable environment for long-term reconstruction.
Today, already in Karabakh and Eastern Zangezur, almost 90,000 people live, work, study. We allocated from our state budget more than $15 billion to different infrastructure and housing projects, but from all sources, the volume of financing to liberated territories is close to $17 billion. Large-scale infrastructure projects are being implemented, including water storages, water canals, power stations, 3 international airports already commissioned, tunnels and bridges. And we are grateful to Islamic Development Bank Group for supporting our efforts in reconstruction of the liberated territories.
That theme of partnership resonated throughout the morning, especially during a very warm speech by ISDB Group President Mohammad Suleyman Al-Jassir. He praised Azerbaijan's resilience and proudly noted that the ISDB was the first multilateral development bank to support reconstruction efforts in liberated Karabakh.
And since Azerbaijan joined the bank in 1992, our cooperation has flourished, with the Islamic Development Bank Group approving approximately $1.8 billion for 84 projects in infrastructure, energy, agriculture, and social services. Projects like the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars Railway and the Alat Free Economic Zone are not isolated national projects. They are regional arteries of trade that perfectly embody our annual meeting's theme, regional integration for sustainable prosperity.
It's clear that this summit is setting a very ambitious roadmap for the region's economic future. Well, that's all for now. We'll keep you covered as more deals come through. Reporting from the ISDB forum in Baku, I am Leila Rahimli, together with our camera operator Ilkin Mehtiev for A News.
Well, with major investments planned in transport, green energy and infrastructure. The summit is also highlighting Azerbaijan's growing role as a regional economic hub. Well, joining us now in the studio is member of Azerbaijani Parliament, Parvana Valieva. Welcome, Parvana. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
President Aliyev really underlined Azerbaijan's financial strength, didn't he? How important is economic stability for the country when it comes to attracting investment and partnerships from overseas?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. In a very complex global environment, Azerbaijan has not only maintained its fiscal discipline, also has strengthened its resilience of the economy. This is the second time we host Islamic Development Bank Group annual meetings since 2010, and within 16 years, big economic progress achieved our country. Related to foreign debts, related to energy corridors, energy routes, regional connectivity, transport, and in every sector. Azerbaijan's story with Islamic Development Bank Group started in 1992 after our independence, and within this year, this cooperation has delivered approximately 1.8 billion US dollar across different sectors: agriculture, financial services, and water resources, energy, transport, different areas over more than 3 decades. And now we are hosting the second time this global event, and this event combined together different financial institutions, international organizations, and they are coming to Baku and see the developments, the cities, and utmost important to see and showcase Azerbaijan's liberated territories, how social development programs is implemented here, also regarding green energy projects. So Azerbaijan economy is now diversifying. As President Ilham Aliyev said that our non-oil sector is 70% of our GDP. It's a big progress because we are oil and gas rich country, and the main priority for our Azerbaijan Vision 2030, this is the strategic program for Azerbaijan's social and economic development. This is the main priority to shift from oil sector to non-oil sector. A clear example is that our budget, national budget for this year, the revenue, 58% of revenue for the national budget will come from non-oil sector. It's more than half of the national budget, so that's why this is also mean that sustainability of public financing, also economic resilience, and having successful shift to economic diversification of Azerbaijan. So economic stability is the main priority for investors, for foreign companies to invest, to put money on business in Azerbaijan.
Another area that investors seem to be very interested in is, as you described, connectivity, cargo, transport, lots of attention on that aspect. What potential is there for Azerbaijan and the region in that area?
Yeah, Azerbaijan is a rare country in the world that turned its geographical location to strategic advantage. We are a landlocked country. Sometimes we are asked that we are from whether Asia or Europe, but we are in the Asia and also in Europe. That's why this is a good example, good opportunity for us. Azerbaijan is located in the ancient Silk Road, and now we are a very strategic partner in the Middle Corridor. We have very good connectivity projects, including Baku-Tbilisi-Kars Railway. This is a very important project project, railway project, not only of the region but of the world. Yes. Because now we see geopolitical tensions, different transit challenges that the world face, and in this context, Azerbaijan and other regional actors is trying to put some investments to increase the capacity of Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway. Its capacity is now 5 million tons, but we aimed to increase it up to 10 million. So we are in this area is a transit country. Azerbaijan is a transit country, it's a safe route, and we are connecting Asia to Europe, and we give some significant benefits across the Eurasia, connecting these countries between each other. We connect Caspian to Black Sea and to Mediterranean Sea. We have pipelines. Also, we have Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline. This is a very important traditional energy corridor, not only for Azerbaijan but also our Central Asian brothers, because they are energy potential also go through this pipeline to Europe. So that's why Azerbaijan is now playing as an energy hub.
And you mentioned, as was stated earlier today, that Azerbaijan is an energy-rich country, but green energy also played a major part of what the president had to say today. How important is green energy to the long-term strategy, long-term economic strategy of the country?
Yeah, this is a very important part for Azerbaijan. This is a long-term energy security strategy of Azerbaijan, and we started it in the beginning of the 2000s years to think about green energy, renewables, energy generation, because Azerbaijan has diversified energy resources, wind, hydropower, solar power resources we have. Also, we have traditional energy, oil and gas. As I said, that we have a Southern Gas Corridor that we are supplying natural gas to 16 countries, and Azerbaijan is number one that's supplying natural gas to with pipeline to different geographic locations, and 10 of them are European Union countries. Also, we are going to supply renewables to European Union. We have some important signed contracts, agreements with European Union, and this is also part of the long-term energy security strategy between European Union and Azerbaijan. Also, we have committed to have 3 green energy zones. They are Karabakh, Eastern Zengezur region, and Nakhchivan. And also, we have 4 green energy corridor projects through Turkey, with Georgia, with Hungary, and also with Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. This project is already is on its way, and it will finish in the near future with Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. We are it will come to the electricity will come from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan on the Caspian seabed. To Azerbaijan, and then through the middle corridor to Europe. So in this context, Azerbaijan is also championing with green energy projects.
And you mentioned Karabakh there. The reconstruction of Azerbaijan's liberated territories was also discussed today. Tell us about the progress that's been made there, and also about the way in which partnerships with international entities are working.
Yeah, exactly. Karabakh and Eastern Gezur regions reconstruction and rebuilding project, rebuilding efforts is one of our country's government's main policy, and President Ilham Aliyev also touched upon this issue during his opening remarks. This is the main part, and we are implementing, as I said, green energy projects here with different international international organizations, also our Central Asia partners helped us in reconstruction. For example, Kazakhstan presented a school to Azerbaijan in Fizuli. Uzbekistan also presented one. They are supporting us. So that's why we are mainly focused on here. Now more than 90,000 people live in these liberated territories. Also, we invested funds to rebuild Karabakh. It is more than 15 billion US dollar. We spent it from our national budget. This year also we allocated some funds from our national budget, public resources. It's like 3.5 billion Azerbaijan manat for reconstruction, and this is our priority. And the main priority is that to integrate these areas to Azerbaijan's other parts. Economic integration. It will be not on other area, but it will grow together with other places. Here Zangilan is very important because Zangilan is located in the international transport corridor. It's a Zangezur corridor. We can call Zangezur as a door to Zangilan as a door to Zangezur.
Yes.
So if this Zangezur corridor will be functional for Zangilan, it will be a very big opportunity. It will bring together, link our Alat economic zone. It's a free economic zone to Zangilan through Horadiz-Aghband railway, and this is already completed. Remained part only is the Zangezur corridor, and it is related to some geopolitical issues right now.
Fascinating. Huge potential there, clearly. The President gave a very detailed speech. It was also a strong and confident one. What is your sense of the overall message to the world that is being given with this event?
Yeah, I think there is also some moral values that link Azerbaijan to Islamic world. Because we are sharing the same values, the same religion. Azerbaijan is a Muslim country. Our people are mainly Muslims, so that's why Azerbaijan also supports some Islamic countries, for example Syria. During its reconstruction, we are building together with Syria some schools, hospitals. Also we are supplying natural gas to Syria through Turkey. We also provided some humanitarian support to Palestinian people. And also Azerbaijan have strong ties with Islamic countries within other platforms. For example, D8, economic cooperation organization. This is also a Muslim majority countries organization. Also, we are a founding member of organization of Turkic states. Turkic states are also Muslim countries. Also, we are member of economic cooperation organization. It is ECO. And the members of these ECO, almost all member countries are Muslim majority population they have. So that's why we can confidently say that Azerbaijan is a strategic partner for Islamic world, and our president also stated about that. The ties will be strengthened in the near future as well.
Well, Pavana, we're very grateful indeed for you coming in to speak to us tonight. We thank you for your analysis. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, after the break, the European Parliament backs one of the toughest migration reforms in the bloc's history. From offshore return hubs to longer detention periods, we'll examine what these changes could mean for Europe. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. EU lawmakers have approved sweeping migration reforms, introducing controversial return hubs outside the bloc for rejected asylum seekers. Well, the package also tightens deportation rules, extends detention periods, and faces strong criticism from human rights groups. Our correspondent Anita Sharma has more.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where lawmakers have approved what supporters call the toughest migration reform in EU history. The vote clears the way for controversial return hubs outside the bloc for rejected asylum seekers and migrants ordered to leave Europe. Backed by center-right and right-wing lawmakers, the legislation is designed to boost deportations by allowing EU countries to transfer failed asylum seekers to third countries, even if they have no personal connection to the destination. The only exception? Unaccompanied minors. Families with children could still be sent to the return hubs. Supporters say the current system is failing, with less than a third of return orders being effectively enforced. The legislation also extends detention periods for migrants awaiting removal from 6 months to as much as 2 years, with tougher entry bans and stronger powers for national authorities. European Commission officials say safeguards will remain in place and insist any return hubs must comply with international law and human rights standards. Several countries, including the Netherlands, Germany, Austria, and Denmark, are already exploring potential agreements with third countries to host the facilities. But the measure faces fierce criticism from human rights groups and progressive lawmakers. They warn the policy could create offshore detention centers and undermine asylum protections. Critics argue the legislation reflects a broader shift towards stricter migration policies across Europe as governments face growing political pressure to reduce irregular migration. The legislation still requires final approval by EU member states, but the vote does mark a major step toward a more restrictive European migration system. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
So supporters say the reforms are needed to improve deportation rates and restore control over migration, while critics warn they could undermine asylum protections and human rights standards. Well, joining us now from Manchester is the journalist and political analyst Shamir Niazi. Shamir, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Great to have you with us tonight. Supporters call this the most significant migration reform in years. But everybody's talking about migration. What problem specifically is Brussels trying to solve?
Well, this reform is coming after a 2-year implementation phase. And it started in April 2014 when this plan was first passed. But now, after the implementation phase, it is now coming into action. But the most significant element of this is that now there are more changes made to it in terms of creation of offshore deportation centers, which have raised many eyebrows amongst human rights organizations. And then they've also increased the time period for detentions, and entry bans are coming into force. And sometimes these entry bans are now lifetime bans for individuals deemed to be national security threats. So this overall this migration plan is not very human right friendly, I would say, and it is something that the EU can be questioned about, especially because how will it be implemented? I mean, offshore deportation centers require other countries to agree for them to be able to set up such facilities, and where exactly, and how will they ensure that the basic human rights would be guaranteed under these deportation centers, and how will they ensure that EU and its own values are being respected and are being protected in these deportation centers. And we've already seen the UK doing a similar effort when it negotiated a deal with Rwanda for offshore deportation center, but it failed miserably. And it was even after spending £700 million on it, the deal failed, and it was cancelled in 2024. And now there's a pending dispute in the International Arbitration Court that Rwanda is asking for 100 million pounds in terms of the payments that are pending by the UK government. So these measures are I would call them they are mostly they're focused on the nationalist and populist political parties on
Yes.
electoral basis. And they are, in terms of implementation, I don't see it happening anytime soon, even though we know that Denmark is working with Netherlands, Germany, and Austria to set up these deportation centers by the end of the year. But I don't know how and where this would be set up.
Yeah, as you say, some of these elements are clearly controversial. These reforms, then, do you think they sort of reflect a broader political shift right across Europe towards stricter migration policies?
Exactly. I mean, in 2015, when the crisis was at its peak, the migration crisis, I wouldn't call it, frankly, a crisis, because there are internally migration is happening in Africa, in the Middle East, in Lebanon, the numbers are far higher, and for Europe with 800 million people and such vast resources, this I wouldn't count it as a migration crisis per se, but it is definitely a political crisis, and this is promoted by the far right and the center right, and this is due to the second nationalist populist wave which is occupying Europe right now. The first one was at the height of the immigration crisis in 2015, and now the second wave, as we speak, is already underway. So yeah, I would call it mostly towards like it is centered towards political objectives and satisfying political expectations of these parties.
Shami, I remember at the beginning of the UK Rwanda proposal, when that sort of first emerged, I think many people were wondering, well, why would a third country volunteer to do this? I mean, how realistic do you think it will be for EU countries to find those third countries willing to host the return centres? I mean, frankly, what's in it for them?
Exactly, because the point of this is that these third countries, either they would be gaining financially, but again, if we are talking about outside the EU, how will the basic human rights would be respected by these third countries, and how will the EU ensure that they are being respected? Then we have the case of Albania and Italy. I mean, they are very close countries, very allied countries, but again, after almost 4 years of far-right efforts in Italy and setting up of a deportation center in Albania, nothing went underway. Like it didn't materialize on the ground. So we have these examples where third countries, even though it's hard to find them, and even if you find them, it's hard to implement on ground practically.
And do you think going forward that this will sort of signify a change, a different longer term approach from the EU to the subject of migration? Or is this frankly more of a sort of a short term way of just appeasing the populist centre right and far right?
I would imagine in the future more such moves can be expected in terms of migration, because the far right is already on the rise in most parts of Europe, and I don't see it quelling anytime soon. So these moves are likely to continue. But again, implementation, once implementation phase gets started, I doubt that practically it's possible to achieve these kind of objectives where you can raid migrants' homes, you can separate families from their kids. So there would be a lot of human rights objections, and I expect them to happen as soon as this process gets implemented on the ground. So it wouldn't be easy, but we can expect a more political efforts directed towards this so-called migrant crisis. So that's my take on it.
Mr. Niazi, we thank you very much indeed for your analysis. Thank you for joining us tonight on Primetime.
Thank you.
After the break, we'll check in with our correspondents around the globe. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. China's Defense Ministry has dismissed recent espionage allegations made by the Five Eyes Global Intelligence Sharing Alliance, calling the claims baseless and politically motivated. Our correspondent Abahayat Jafarova has more from Beijing.
China's Ministry of National Defense has rejected accusations that Chinese intelligence agencies are using online job platforms to recruit government employees from Western countries. Speaking at a briefing in Beijing, Defense Ministry spokesman Shan Si described the allegations as groundless and are driven by ulterior motives. His comments came after security agencies from the Five Eyes Alliance, which includes the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada and New Zealand, issued a warning about China. They alleged that Chinese intelligence operatives were attempting to recruit people with access to sensitive information through online platforms. Chan said the claims about the so-called Chinese spy threat lack evidence. He added that some countries continue to view China through a Cold War lens and called for what he described as a more objective and rational approach towards China. Separately, U.S. authorities recently announced the seizure of 13 internet domains that they said were linked to efforts to gather information on behalf of Chinese intelligence services. Beijing has consistently denied espionage allegations made by Western governments, describing them as fabrications and attempts to smear China's image. Abahayat Jafarova, A News, Beijing, China.
A UK local election in Makerfield could have national consequences. Well, voters are choosing a new MP, but the result could elevate a figure seen as a potential challenger to Prime Minister Keir Starmer's leadership. Our correspondent Zainab Farizada has the details.
Voters in Makerfield are heading to the polls to choose a new MP. The by-election was triggered after a Labour MP resigned to allow the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, to contest the seat. Even so, there are 14 candidates. A lot of people are watching what happens. Why? Because the result of this vote could have national implications. If Burnham wins, it could create a challenge to Prime Minister Keir Starmer's leadership of the Labour Party. He is one of Labour's most recognisable figures and has long been viewed as a potential contender for leading the party. Supporters see him as a politician with strong appeal among working-class voters, while critics argue his ambitions could further divide the party. The by-election comes at a difficult moment for Starmer. Recent election setbacks and high-profile ministerial resignations have raised questions about his authority and the direction of his government. The contest is also being closely watched as a test of support for right-wing parties. Reform UK has been making gains in areas that traditionally backed Labour and is hoping to build on that momentum. Analysts say the results could reveal whether Labour is still able to hold on to its core voters or whether support is continuing to shift towards parties on the right. For Burnham, the vote could be the first step back into national politics. For Starmer, it is another test of his leadership, and for Reform UK, it's an opportunity to show that its recent gains are more than a protest vote. That's why a by-election in one corner of the Greater Manchester area is attracting attention far beyond Makerfield itself. Zainab Farizada, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Pakistan is highlighting its role as a key mediator in the agreement reached between Washington and Tehran. Islamabad has described the deal as a diplomatic success and says further steps are now being taken towards its implementation. Mariam Zia brings us more now.
Pakistan is moving to define its role as a diplomat in light of the successful mediation efforts between Washington and Tehran. The final agreement signed by both sides is known as the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding, which is a testament to Islamabad's critical role. On June 18, Prime Minister of Pakistan Shehbaz Sharif said that the deal had been endorsed by Pakistan, describing it as an evidence of both sides' commitment to a diplomatic resolution of the conflict. In a series of statements posted on X, he thanked the leaders and officials involved in the high-level negotiations between US and Iran. He also acknowledged the contributions of Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt. Sharif credited Pakistan's military chief, Asim Munir, as a key facilitator of the final breakthrough. President Asif Ali Zardari described the development as a historic moment and said that Pakistan had maintained a principled, balanced, and constructive role throughout the crisis. Pakistan's Foreign Office has dispatched a delegation to Switzerland for the next phase of talks, while officials also point to the diplomatic outreach and international recognition of Islamabad's efforts as implementation of the agreement begins. Mariam Zia, A News, Islamabad.
US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth has warned that some European allies may be falling short of their NATO commitments, even as the Trump administration has announced plans to cut thousands of American troops stationed in Germany and Poland. Well, NATO defence ministers are gathering in Brussels just days before a major NATO leaders summit. William Denislow reports from Brussels.
NATO's Secretary-General Mark Rutte says that this gathering of defence ministers and the gathering of NATO leaders in Turkey in a couple of weeks' time is all about the issue of delivering on defence spending, delivering on improving defence capabilities, manufacturing more weaponry, more military hardware, and delivering for Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukraine's president, here at this NATO gathering of defence ministers, calls for more support on the battlefield as well as air defences. Now, on the issue of defence spending, Mark Rutte, full of praise for Canada and European allies, saying that defence spending in the past year has increased to the tune of nearly 20%. However, Pete Hegseth, while welcoming some of those developments, say it is still falling well shy of what the United States needs to see. That is why, as part of his wider objective to achieve what he describes as NATO 3.0, he wants to see Europe taking the lead when it comes to European security. He says even more defence spending is needed by European allies to achieve that. He's launched a 6-month review where he'll be seeing where Europe is at when it comes to that pledge. Now, he says some European allies will pass this test with flying colours. He warns others will fail. He said he is going to be having candid conversations both in public and in private with those members to try and force them to honour their commitments to boost defence spending from previous goals of 2% annual GDP on defence to 5% come the year 2035. The US has warned there will be real consequences, potentially the US cutting its NATO contributions if European partners aren't upholding their end of the bargain. So Pete Hegseth says that they are committed to this military alliance, but he warns that it must be a two-way street. William Denslow, Free News, reporting from NATO headquarters in Brussels.
Turkey and Central Asia are deepening cooperation on trade, transport and connectivity as officials meet in Ankara for a regional forum focused on the middle corridor linking Europe and Asia. Adam Morrow reports.
Representatives from Turkey and Central Asian countries have gathered in Ankara for the Central Asia-Turkey Forum, a high-level event focused on strengthening political, economic, and strategic cooperation across the region. Discussions are focused on trade, energy, transportation, regional security, and the future of Eurasian connectivity. Particular attention is being given to the Middle Corridor, a multimodal trade route linking Central Asia and China to Europe through the Caspian Sea, the South Caucasus, and Turkey. The Middle Corridor has gained increasing importance in recent years as governments and businesses seek faster and more diversified alternatives to traditional transport routes. During a panel discussion devoted to the Middle Corridor, speakers stressed the importance of the South Caucasus, including Azerbaijan, in the emerging land route.
Without Azerbaijan, there is no link. So in that sense, Azerbaijan is the connecting not only Central Asia with Turkey, but Central Asia to Europe.
Forum participants also discussed opportunities for cooperation in logistics, digital transformation, infrastructure development, and energy security. The event comes at a time when Ankara is placing growing emphasis on its relations with the Turkic world and seeking to expand economic links with Central Asian partners. Attendees also exchanged views on Eurasia's rapidly changing geopolitical landscape and on ways to strengthen regional resilience and multimodal connectivity. Discussions also built on priorities identified at recent meetings of the Organization of Turkic States, where connectivity, trade, and economic integration have featured prominently. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Turkish capital Ankara.
The European Parliament has adopted one of its strongest assessments yet of political developments in Georgia, raising concerns over democratic backsliding, political repression, and the country's stalled path toward European integration. Our correspondent Nini Nikolashvili reports.
The European Parliament has delivered a stark assessment of developments in Georgia, adopting one of its strongest resolutions yet on the country. The resolution calls for the immediate release of what lawmakers describe as political prisoners, including former President Mikhail Saakashvili. It also backs targeted sanctions against Bidina Ivanishvili, senior members of the Georgian Dream ruling party, and others they say are responsible for the democratic backslide. The report comes as relations between Tbilisi and Brussels remain strained following a series of disputes over democratic reforms. The EU says the continued democratic decline could further jeopardize its path toward European Union membership. It also puts at risk Georgia's visa-free travel regime with the EU. At the same time, lawmakers have underlined Georgia's strategic importance for regional connectivity. While stressing the country's key role in the Middle Corridor linking Europe and Asia, they argue that route's long-term success depends on adherence to the rule of law. The resolution also flagged the growing Chinese and Russian influence over infrastructure that is considered strategically important for East-West connectivity. Lawmakers also raised concerns about sanctions enforcement, warning that Georgian infrastructure could be used to help circumvent restrictions imposed Russia and Iran. Particular emphasis was placed on the Kulevi oil terminal and refinery on the Black Sea coast. The resolution also criticizes what it describes as growing Russian, Chinese, and Iranian influence in Georgia. The Georgian government has strongly rejected the resolution. Foreign Minister Makaba Charishvili said that European Parliament resolutions are not legally binding and that this recent assessment is built on what she describes as false narratives aimed at damaging Georgia's reputation and national interests. She added that the report does not reflect realities on the ground and maintains that European integration still remains Georgia's strategic foreign policy priority. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A News.
The Caspian Sea continues to shrink, raising concerns over the future of one of the world's most unique ecosystems. In Kazakhstan, lawmakers are now calling for a single digital map of the coastline after parts of the shore retreated by up to 35 kilometers in less than 2 decades. Our correspondent reports from Almaty.
The Caspian Sea is the world's largest inland body of water, but its future is at risk. Parts of its shoreline have receded by up to 35 kilometers over the past 2 decades. Official data show that the water levels along Kazakhstan's coast continue to decline. The northeastern Caspian now stands at around minus 29 meters below the Baltic reference level. One member of parliament is now calling for a unified system to track changes along the coast. He says because existing government records do not reflect the sea's actual boundaries. The proposal would involve a single digital map to track the reality of the situation, which includes a number of ecological challenges. The retreating shoreline is creating problems with regard to land management, natural resource development and investment projects. It's also raising concerns about the region's fragile ecosystem. Environmental pressures have become increasingly visible. Since April, dead Caspian seals have repeatedly been found along Kazakhstan's coast. Last autumn, nearly 2,000 seal carcasses washed ashore in one of the largest incidents recorded in recent years. The proposal for a digital coastline tracking system would collect satellite, hydrological and geodetic data and establish a coordinated response mechanism for mass death of seals, fish and birds. And if something isn't done, scientists warn the Caspian could lose another 3 to 5 meters of water by 2050. And that could affect millions of people across the 5 countries that share its coastline and put additional pressure on an ecosystem already under strain. Arisa Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Uzbekistan's national football team has made its long-awaited FIFA World Cup debut, taking on Colombia in the opening match of Group K. While the result did not go Uzbekistan's way, the game delivered a historic milestone for the nation and drew support from fans. Our correspondent Seville Rajapova has more.
History was made in Mexico City on June 18, as Uzbekistan played its first ever match at the FIFA World Cup. Ahead of the historic match, regional leaders attending Tashkent International Investment Forum offered their congratulations and support. Uzbekistan's President Shavkat Mirziyoyev himself also offered support for the team. He even made special arrangements so families could cheer on the team, allowing state working hours start at 10 a.m. instead of 9. Kickoff was at 7 a.m. Tashkent time on Thursday. For the team's World Cup debut, it faced Colombia in its Group K opener at the Azteca Stadium in Mexico City.
It's the first ever World Cup and we are so excited to be here in Mexico and this historic stadium where Maradona and Pelé won their World Cups, and we're so happy to face Colombia, a very good team, very high valued, elite team. And this is a big test for us.
Despite a valiant effort, Uzbekistan eventually fell 3-1 to the Colombian side. But they did show moments of promise, twice coming close to changing the outcome of the match. During the 60th minute, when Abbas Bekfazulayev scored the team's first ever goal at the FIFA World Cup. The result leaves Colombia top of the Group K with 3 points, while Portugal and DR Congo share second place after drawing 1-1. Uzbekistan currently sits 4th in the group and will now turn its attention to its next challenge against Portugal on June 23rd. It is Sivil Rajap reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
As artificial intelligence becomes increasingly integrated into daily life, questions are growing over how innovation can advance without compromising individual freedoms. With human rights officials and ombudsman representatives from around the world gathered here in Baku to explore possible answers to those concerns.
Artificial intelligence is advancing at a lightning speed, but is it leaving fundamental rights behind? In Baku, Azerbaijan, that question is now at the center of a major international response, as ombudsmen and heads of national human rights institutions from around the world have gathered for the International Baku Ombudsman Summit. The high-level forum brought together representatives from around 30 countries, representatives from the region including Azerbaijan, Turkey, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan, as well as Pakistan, Oman, Moldova, Ukraine, and Zambia.
yapay zeka çağında yaşıyoruz.
We live in the age of artificial intelligence. There are many areas in which it serves humanity, from healthcare and education to transportation, the economy, and even the legal field. People are able to benefit from the opportunities it provides. However, it also carries risks. These algorithms operate on data. The more data that is collected, the greater the potential threat to individuals' security. In particular, there are concerns regarding people's privacy and the protection of their private lives. If these technologies are not properly regulated, ethical issues may arise, and new legal challenges may emerge. In this regard, it is extremely important that this meeting has been held in Azerbaijan.
Opening sessions focused on the rapid rise of AI and its impacts on public administration and human rights. Delegates weighed both the opportunities and risks with particular attention on transparency, accountability, and the protection of individual rights. Alongside the main plenary, participants took part in parallel discussions on key issues including digital rights, data privacy and security, the future of work, and the growing need for digital literacy in the age of AI. During the event, several agreements were signed with the host country. The summit concluded with the adoption of the Baku Declaration, a framework aimed at guiding the ethical development of artificial intelligence and strengthening global standards on transparency, justice, and accountability.
Ve əlaqələndirilmiş dəstəyi ilə geniş olduqca əhəmiyyətlidir.
What is even more important, the human rights standards are not so, let's say, static. They are alive, dynamic, and if you want to have some more knowledge about the human rights and the possibility on how to deal with the violation of human rights, then we have to cooperate. Any kind of the cooperation, including the written memorandum on the cooperation, will take us to the new stage, let's say, in fighting against those who violate human rights, not only in our countries but all over the world. So the human rights institution has to do this. It is very good for the strengthening of our institution capacities, but also for the strengthening of all the members of our staff.
İnsan hüquqlarına təsir edən hər bir
Notably, the opening day of the summit falls on June 18, which is the Human Rights Day in Azerbaijan, adding symbolic weight to discussions on the rights in the digital age. İlknur Seydamirova with Zohrab Shirinov reports from Baku, Azerbaijan.
G7 leaders have wrapped up their summit with both Washington and Paris praising international cooperation as attention turns to the newly announced US-Iran peace deal and plans to sign it in Switzerland on Friday. Ross Cullen reports from Evian.
Well, the G7 summit here in Evian in France has now come to a close after 3 days of discussions between the leaders from the UK, the US, France, Germany, Italy, Japan and Canada. The host President Emmanuel Macron gave a news conference after the conclusion of the summit, which he said had been held amid very difficult global circumstances, fragmentation, division and multiple crises and conflicts. But he said it had objectively been a success, with unanimous agreement from all of the leaders on 9 different communiques, different subject areas, including on Ukraine, Iran, economic growth and artificial intelligence. The US President Donald Trump also addressed the media after the end of the summit, saying that economic catastrophe had been avoided because of the agreement between the United States and Iran, the Memorandum of Understanding. He also hailed the US naval blockade as one of the most famous in history. That was what the United States imposed in response to Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz. Donald Trump admitting that trying to recover already enriched uranium from inside Iran would be very difficult, and he also warned Tehran that if they did not abide by their commitments, the United States could very easily restart a bombing campaign. After the conclusion of the summit, Donald Trump was not immediately flying home. In fact, he'd been invited to dinner by Emmanuel Macron, but not in Evian. In fact, at the Golden Palace of Versailles, just outside Paris, as part of celebrations marking 250 years of US independence. Ross Cullen, A News in Evian.
A new animation inspired by a book is using storytelling to raise awareness about an important social issue. Artemisa combines history, culture and creativity to tell a powerful story of a young girl's fight for education and self-determination. Our correspondent Nartuchek Yahangurli talked to the creators. Let's take a look.
In a remote village, a young girl faces fear, tradition, and an ancient secret while fighting for an education and the chance to rewrite her own destiny. This idea is at the heart of Artemisa, a new animation inspired by a book. Created within the framework of the Her Art in Action programme by Vayok's art platform, Artemisa is another project dedicated to raising awareness about an important social issue.
Basically, it's talking about how early marriages can prevent girls from studying, how it's important for girls to study, and also it's important that girls study in non-traditionally women jobs, because usually what we see in television or we see women and families promoting is girls in Azerbaijan being doctors or teachers. This is promoting like non-traditional roles, like one of the girls wants to be an engineer, construction engineer, and she wants to build bridges.
At the same time, the authors chose a unique character inspired by Azerbaijan's history, helping to shine a light on forgotten times and cultures.
Atama çok yalvardım. Bırak, gidip okuyayım, öğrenim. When I came across to this old history of Azerbaijan, I realized because we have been around for so long in this land, and we are imagining that everybody in this country is named Shams or Gulshan or Sevinch. We forgot that there were Atropatena and there were Artemisas living on this land as well. It's a piece of Azerbaijani history. I wanted to show that through centuries, Azerbaijani women, they experienced the same challenges. 2,000 years later, a girl is fighting for her education again.
The team behind the adaptation says that turning the book into an animation was a challenging process, especially because of the importance of the topic.
From the very beginning, we collaborated closely and professionally with both the illustrator and the designer. After outlining our animation requirements, they created the characters and scenes for us. Using those assets as a foundation, we then developed and produced the animation. And together we were able to bring the project to life.
After I received the book, I divide all the pages and I make sure it depends on the children's ages, because it's really important to make it very readable for them and to make sure the colors and the fonts and everything is readable and catchy for the children's.
Vayok's art platform is continuing to bring important social issues to the public agenda through art. As they develop new projects, they are actively looking for partners and collaborators to join them in their future work.
Beautiful work and a truly inspiring story. Well, that brings us to the end of Primetime for tonight. Andy Mioch will be back with you tomorrow with plenty more news and analysis. And from all of us here at A News, thanks for watching.